very sort of omelette-y, I think.
Cleanliness is next to godliness in the 1900 house. Tonight at 9 on 4.
Now on 4, examining Lord Kitchener's controversial policy of herding women and children into concentration camps in the penultimate episode of the Boer War.
I think the guerrilla war started in an attempt by the Boer leaders to cause as much unpleasantness to the British forces as they possibly could, in the hope that they would eventually get fed up with it all and there'd be some sort of a peace. I think that was really what was behind it. And then, of course, Lord Kitchener decided on his scorched earth policy and the concentration camps and all that sort of thing, which has left a bad taste ever since.
The mortuary at Kroonstadt camp. The piles of coffins. The bereaved women.
I don't know how many funerals there were a day. People said that if you put all the mothers' tears together, you'd have enough to fill a dam. I can remember them saying that.
The British outnumbered the Boers 10-1, but beyond the cities, which the British controlled, it seemed like bandit country. Captain March Phillips described the predicament in a letter home.
It is bad country for our business. To us, mountain ranges are not fine scenery, but strong positions. Rocks and crags are not picturesque, but merely good cover. We always serve out extra ammunition when we come to a pretty bit of scenery.
The British struggled across barren landscapes. They clung to defensive positions. They felt uneasy and impotent.
The veldt is a void to us. The enemy are watching us now from a rise a few miles away, waiting for our next move. They are all round and about us, like water round a ship, parting before our bows and reuniting round our stern. Our passage makes no impression and leaves no visible trace.
But the Boers left plenty of traces.
Wanneer komt ons trouwdag, Gerkie, Gerkie, los dit dan so stil met jou. So lank geloop al, Gerkie, Gerkie, dit is tyd dat ons gaan trou. O, my Gerkie, ek sal nooit nie.
The whole British Army depended for its supply on a fragile railway network. In January 1901, Kitchener began a building scheme to protect lines and junctions from Boer attack. They were the last English castles. A chain of blockhouses across the landscape, one in sight of the next, fenced between with barbed wire. The usual garrison was an NCO and 6 infantrymen, plus armed blacks, much used for sentry duty at night. It became a system not just for protecting the railway, but for catching Boers. Mobile columns would sweep the veldt, driving the Boers towards the blockhouse lines, where armoured trains would administer the death blow. That, at any rate, was the theory. The Boer general, Christian de Wet, called it the blockhead system.
The English were so busy building blockhouses that they had no time to fight us, and it was all money thrown away.
A dark night, a bit of ingenuity, and a pair of wire cutters were all de Wet needed to beat the system. Will Saxon served in blockhouses near Harrismith. He found time to sketch and write home to his sweetheart, Mary.
The blockhouses are placed on eminences with from 1 to 3 miles distance between them. We are pretty safe here. We have open country in front. We have ammunition and biscuits and bully beef enough to withstand a month or more. I got a parcel of tobacco from you last week. Tonight we shall have mosquitoes by the million. Niggers patrol the barbed wire entanglements between blockhouses. They will do anything for a white man. It is 10 o'clock. 4 of the garrison are playing whist for their rum rations. Some are asleep. One is studying geometry. Give my regards to your mother. I am yours till lights out, and after. Will.
Will Saxon survived the war, returning home to marry Mary. But lives were lost in the blockhouses, successful as they became at reducing Boer sabotage. Houtkraal Stasi in the flatlands of the Orange Free State. A cluster of graves near the site of an old blockhouse. Almost certainly those of 14 black soldiers, killed by the Boers while guarding the blockhouse for Britain. British frustration grew as the Boers moved freely across the veldt, supported by civilians on farms.
My grandmother always cooked food for them. She put it in a hole outside, because she couldn't have them in the house. And they'd go there at night to eat. They knew which hole to go to and look in, where food would be hidden for them.
Obviously something had to be done about it because the Boers were being supplied by their families and things like that on the farms. And the idea of the concentration camp was to get all the farm folk, families, into an area where they couldn't assist their husbands who were fighting the British.
Commander-in-Chief Lord Roberts had started clearing the Boers into concentration camps in 1900, borrowing an idea first used by Spain in 1896 to crush rebellion in Cuba. Roberts' successor in South Africa, Lord Kitchener, stepped up the policy.
All possible means shall be taken to stop the present guerrilla warfare. One that has lately been successfully tried on a small scale is the removal of all men, women and children and natives from the districts which the enemy bands persistently occupy. The women and children brought in should be camped near the railway for supply purposes. The ordnance will supply the necessary tents, and the district commissioner will look after the food.
A farm in the Orange Free State, burned by the British in 1900. One of perhaps 30,000 destroyed in the process of clearing the veldt. Boer families watched as all they had worked for was put to the torch. Then to the camps. A miserable journey made a century ago by Christina Nienaber.
Hulle het ons in die kamp gesit het. Hulle het die ander plek gehad, hulle moes hulle in die kamp sit.
They chased everyone to the camp. Those who could not ride simply had to walk to the camps. People couldn't stay in their houses. The houses had all been burned. Many, many people were in the camps. If only my mother were alive, she'd tell you.
They were crammed into tents, giving little protection against South Africa's extreme climate. Not all the camps were fenced in, but the people weren't free to leave. This helped the Boers, who couldn't look after their families and fight a guerrilla war. In some camps, the sanitation was dire, the food appalling. Christina Nienaba was here, in Potchefstroom.
My mother said it was tough in the camp. What do I know? I was a child. In our tent we were 3 women and 4 children. We just had to fend for ourselves. She said once a week we got a little piece of meat, which they then had to cook outside. Of course there were no stoves. She just had to make a fire. This is how we lived. This is how we got our food and stuff. And the children got sick, and 5 children died. My sister died, my brother died. Mama was miserable about her children.
Ach, my hart is nu bewogen, en met trane in my ogen, zie ek myne kleinste aan.
The site today of Christina's concentration camp at Potchefstroom.
In my heart is nu
The names of her sister Maria and brother Christian are inscribed on the death roll. 26,000 Boer women and children, 10% of their population, died in Britain's white concentration camps in South Africa.
I think one must look upon the camps, and I'm not going to try to justify anything one way or the other, as a manifestation of the frustration felt by the British High Command. The war would not come to an end. They had no answer for guerrilla warfare. None of the things they knew worked. They saw the farms as sources of food, of shelter for these roving commanders. So, put them in camps. But the people who do that have no idea of how you organize a civilian camp. How closely do you group people together? How do you see to the drainage of the soil, latrines, the water supply?
Unfortunately, with a large number of people in a small area, and I imagine probably not an awful lot of medicines available, things got out of hand, and the medical authorities just couldn't cope with the amount of disease which was prevalent in the concentration camps at that particular time.
Hopelessly overwhelmed camp hospitals suddenly faced epidemics of measles, pneumonia, dysentery, typhoid. Diseases unknown to most Boers out on the veldt.
They have lived in isolation now for virtually 100 years. Healthy people, but a people in isolation. And when they are exposed suddenly to a large influx of people from outside, they come into contact with the organisms that carry the disease, particularly measles. It is a devastating disease for an unexposed community.
Ach, my hart is nu bewogen en met trane in my ogen zie ek myne kleinste aan die vooral toes weg moes gaan en my hart is nu doorsnijdend, want wat moet my kleinste lijden? Hier lag sy met grote pijn, maar God sal haar leidsman zijn.
As die kinders siek geword het,
when the authorities learned there was a sick child in your tent, they took that child to a hospital. And the Boer women strongly believed that within 3 days that child would be dead. So if a child became ill, you just hid him in the tent and kept him there, so that when they inspected the tents, they would not know that there was a sick child there.
Alival North concentration camp by the Krai River in the Orange Free State. 546 children would perish here. As death rates rose, some Boer mothers began to fear that the British were trying to kill them. A gulf of suspicion opened up. The British doctors told the Boers to keep their tents well ventilated, and they restricted the diet of dysentery and typhoid sufferers. But the Boers thought they were being frozen and starved to death. Rumours abounded of infected meat, of poison in the medicine, ground glass in the flour and sugar.
The concentration camps were regarded by the nation as genocide. My own aunt, who was in the camp with my father, told me that every day they'd strain their flour through a very fine gauze sieve to remove bits of glass from the flour. They couldn't use it straight from the sack. Whether these things were orchestrated from the top, or whether it was unfavorable conditions, is not for me to say. I only know that a lot of research is done on it today, and there are very strong theories that a form of genocide went hand in hand with the terrifyingly high mortality rate in the camps.
There were some exceptionally good ones. There were some that were very badly run. There were some that were grotesquely inefficient. But to say that this was a policy of genocide, which some people have claimed, is absolute... Well, I was going to use a rude word. I'll just say tripe.
We must state clearly that the aim of the concentration camps was not genocide. What happened there was just poor administration, but particularly poor administration by the British Army authorities.
The British had shown scant regard for the health of their own men. Thousands of Tommies had already died of disease. The welfare of the enemy was an even lower priority. Kitchener fobbed off inquiries about the camps, saying the inmates were happy and conditions improving. But in mid-1901, the truth leaked out, and the whistleblower was neither an outraged Boer nor an intrepid journalist, but a well-connected Liberal from Cornwall, Emily Hobhouse.
Vauxhall Vectra. Now re-engineered for maximum comfort and effortless driving. It makes every journey feel shorter. The new Vauxhall Vectra, the end of long journeys.
Vauxhall, raising the standard.
Now remember, Darren, exhausts need to be double quick. Same with oil changes, tyres and batteries. Always remembering, of course, to double check everything. But brakes, they can take a bit longer. That's why it takes time to earn one of these. Got all that?
So it's quick, 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 slow.
Ah, well, if it's dancing you're after, that's one of our other specialities. Allow me to show you. You can't get better than a quick, quick winner. We're the ones that trust.
In real life, I can't abide kids. But I would go for a credit card that takes the worry out of shopping on the internet.
Apply for the egg card at egg.com.
Mommy. I'll grow up.
In Harmony, the new album from Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Includes the single Ain't No Sunshine featuring Desiree. And Once in a Blue Moon with Lighthouse Family. The spirit of Africa, the sound of Ladysmith Black Mambazo in Harmony. Out now on CD, cassette and video selection.
www.rightthat'sit.com, www.youarehavingalaugh.com, www.ah.com. For the next 4 weeks in the Sunday Times, Mastering the Net, a free step-by-step guide on how to get the most out of the internet. www.wahey.com.
Homebase, there are hundreds of great new offers this autumn, including up to 25% off all laminate flooring.
Save a bit of money here.
You can save a lot of money here.
Which toothpaste is now clinically proven to protect where your brush can't? Colgate Total. So advanced it even protects below the gum line.
I am only one.
I cannot do everything.
But I can do something.
And because I cannot do everything,
I will do the something that I can do.
Every person can make a difference, and every company. At BP, we've made a commitment to the world in which we live and breathe, starting with the introduction of cleaner, greener fuels that substantially reduce emissions. BP, for the journey ahead.
My father told us that one particular day they were ordered to stand in front of their tents. A lady from England had arrived called Emily Hobhouse. He saw her and she was dressed beautifully. And you know, they were ashamed of their mothers who were so neglected in their old tattered clothes and their faces uncared for, their hair uncombed. But he saw her. She had a gentle face and she spoke to them in English, which he didn't really understand. And after she left, things improved in the camp.
Emily Hobhouse had heard unconfirmed reports about farm burnings and the plight of Boer women and children. A campaigner for social welfare, she reached South Africa in January 1901. Nearly a century ago, she walked down this path to meet Annie Strauss, the local Boer woman who would guide her around Springfontein concentration camp. Jennifer Hobhouse Balm follows in her great-aunt's footsteps. Her guide is Annie Strauss's great-granddaughter, Suzanne.
Hello.
You must be Suzanne.
I am, and you must be Jennifer. Pleased to meet you.
Right.
Welcome here.
Emily Hobhouse sat here with Suzanne's great-grandmother Annie, distributing clothes to the women from Springfontein camp next door. She had visited other camps, but nowhere else had she seen such extreme poverty. A few months after Emily's visit, Annie Strauss and her family were themselves moved into the camp. A precious memento has survived from that time.
And this little doll, it was a present
Yes.
for my grandmum when she was in the refugee camp.
Yes.
You see, there is her name, and look there.
Yes.
It's the old little body.
Yes.
Corrie
Isn't that
Strauss,
marvellous?
refugee camp, Springfontein, June 1901.
Well, I think this is the same one that later on was quite a fuss about a child called Lizzie Van Zyl, and Emily had given her the doll, and you can just see the doll in the picture.
Lizzie Van Zyl was one of a number of children Emily saw in varying stages of emaciation. The controversy arose because this photograph inspired a newspaper campaign in England blaming the Boers for their own misfortune.
The theory put around was that the people were bad mothers and they weren't clean, and of course they neglected their children and they used Dutch medicines, which were folk medicines, and that was what she had to answer. And Emily felt it was extremely unfair to try and blame it on the mothers.
Suzanne takes Jennifer across the field, once crowded with tents and people, down to the wash place by the railway. With water in short supply, it was hard to keep clean, and the British controlled the access.
It's the women concentration camp, and the stones where they could wash their clothes, and the bell that they used to call the people for their turn.
It looks like a bit of old railway line.
This was the piece, the bell that they used. You see how many a time they used it? And they...
There was no soap in the rations when Emily came out here. Well, it was all right for the women who could buy things, but a lot of them had no money, and they were completely reliant on the rations that they were given, and that was a tragedy. Well, each tent had a tragedy.
The more camps Emily visited, the more aware she became of the scale of the dying.
I began to compare a parish I had known at home of 2,000 people, where a funeral was an event. Here, some 20 to 25 were carried away daily. The full realization of the position dawned upon me. It was a death rate such as had never been known except in the times of the Great Plagues. The whole talk was of death. Who died yesterday? Who lay dying today? Who would be dead tomorrow? Another child had died in the night, and I found all 3 little corpses being photographed for the absent fathers to see someday.
Emily was devastated by the death rates especially amongst the children. She loved children. She felt they were completely innocent. The women might support their husbands, but the children were really the brunt of the war was on them.
Emily saw for herself how families suffered even before reaching the camps. On Springfontein railway station she found 600 people, huddled under trucks and makeshift canopies.
To such a shelter I was called to see a sick baby. The mother sat on her little trunk with the child across her knee. She had nothing to give it, and the child was sinking fast. I thought a few drops of brandy might save it, but though I had money, there was none to be had. I thought of the superintendent of the camp a mile off, and sent a hasty message to ask him to let me have some for a sick child, but the reply was that his supplies were only for his camp. There was nothing to be done, and we watched the child draw its last breath in reverent silence. The mother neither moved nor wept. It was her only child. Dry-eyed but deathly white, she sat there motionless, looking not at the child, but far, far away into the depths of grief beyond all tears.
This description of Emily's was to inspire the tableau at the heart of the Women's Memorial in Bloemfontein. She returned to England and wrote a report describing the camps, urging reform if not abolition of the whole system. But her views were not welcome.
Many people thought that Emily was a traitor, so they were very rude to Emily, a lot of people in the drawing rooms of London. If she was introduced, they'd turn their back. And they just weren't prepared to listen.
But the Liberal opposition leader listened. Drawing on Emily's information, Sir Henry Campbell Bannerman publicly denounced the methods of barbarism being used against the Boers. The Daily News gave a full page to Emily's report on the camps, including her description of the misery she witnessed at Springfontein. A vociferous minority in Britain opposed the Boer War, some on moral, others on political grounds. Emily's revelations came as a godsend. But anti-war speakers like the young Liberal MP David Lloyd George had great difficulty getting their views across, as a silent feature film showed. The crowd branded him a traitor and rioted. The Tory establishment also went on the attack, exemplified by a contributor to the Times.
The Boer women have proved themselves to be very dangerous enemies. We may admire their courage, but they have forfeited the right to be considered non-belligerents.
But British High Commissioner in South Africa, Lord Milner, had no illusions in private about where the responsibility lay.
While 100 explanations may be offered, and 100 excuses made, they do not really add up to an adequate defence. The children will all be dead by the spring of 1903. Only I shall not be there to see, as the continuance of the present state of affairs will undoubtedly blow us all out of the water.
By autumn 1901, Britain's concentration camps in South Africa were an international scandal. The European press revelled in Britain's shame. Edward VII deserved to hang for his country's crimes. Kitchener was a bloodthirsty monster. But not every Boer woman and child fell into his clutches. Some women, like Elizabeth van den Berg, took drastic steps, as she told her daughter Ada.
Sodoende het hulle bes gedoen om so goed as moontlik.
It was vital for them to hide themselves as well as possible.
Want hulle was bang vir die konsentrasie.
They were scared of the concentration camps.
Berigte deurgekom, my ma het maar altyd gehoor.
My mother had heard about lots of people, especially children, dying in the camps.
In die konsentrasiekampe.
Ada Prinsloo's mother escaped with a group of women into the mountains of the Eastern Free State. This cave was one of many hiding places women used in the Boer War.
My oudste sister is gebore daar.
My oldest sister was born in the cave. 7 babies in all were born in the cave. My fierce old auntie, her little girl was also born there. Because they did not have water to bathe the children with, they smeared goat fat on her body to clean her up. One morning, Aunt Martha said that if she didn't get a cup of coffee, she'd die. The other women said to her, "Please, the mountain's crawling with English. We can't make a fire." But she said, "English or no English, today I'm having coffee." She got some water and she gathered some bat droppings to make a fire. And the smoke had barely left the cave when guns and bayonets were pushed inside. The Brits were all over the place. And they said, "Hands up."
Just before the women reached the concentration camp, they were rescued by a Boer commando.
Mummy said that they just fled from one place to the next. The Korana Mountains are high and there are quite a few places to hide. So they got away and muddled along till the end of the war.
Black loyalties were split. Some sided with the British, others remained loyal to the Boer families for whom they worked. Pauline McQuenna's mother went into hiding with her white mistress.
My
mother stayed with these women in the mountains. When the food was finished, my mother would go down to the village and look for food. When she had found some, she would take it back to them. She took it to the women living in the cave in the mountains. My mother and that white woman lived in the cave. She used to smear the woman with something like dye or paint or oil to disguise her as a black woman.
Heeft burgers lied der vrijheid aan.
Some women fled on ox wagons into the veldt, keeping one jump ahead of British mobile columns. The traditional, subservient role of women in Boer society was changing. Responsibility for their family's survival on the veldt and their defiant stoicism in the camps gave Boer women new authority, new commitment. In many ways, they had made the Boer cause their own. Some liked to be photographed holding guns. A handful actually went to war. Helena Herbst Wagner dressed in her husband's clothes and spent 5 months fighting alongside men before they realized her true identity. And there were others.
Sarah Raal was so 'n voorbeeld.
Sarah Raal is an example. She was in the Springfontein concentration camp. She ran away and joined her brothers and father. And she was a commando in the Southern Free State. She carried a revolver. Interestingly enough, from her memoirs, one never learns if she had ever shot at British columns. But she did shoot at blacks who had killed Boers. And that was her justification for taking up arms.
Oh dear, inadequate car. Well, I think it's time you tried the new Nissan Primera.
At home Base, there are hundreds of great new offers this autumn, including up to 15% off all bath suites.
Save a bit of money here.
You can save a lot of money here.
3 o'clock. It's at 3 o'clock. 9 o'clock. Look at 9. Spitfire on your tail at 6.
Relive the greatest exploits of war aviation, minute by minute, with Aircraft of the Aces, Men, Legends and Models, a collection of books and metal miniatures. Get the first book together with a model of a Spitfire and a technical card for only $1.95.
You guys kill me. You take a delicious Oriental infusion and dump cow juice into it. You invent a sport that no one understands, and the whole world still whips you at it. And your most popular dish is curry. Nowadays, even your civil wars are civilized. All it takes is one lousy mutt, and bang goes the Great British Reserve. Small country, isn't it?
Sorry?
When it comes to sex, we all know what you prefer, but you must be doing something right. Because 17 million of us, Johnny Foreigners, would rather fly your airline than any of our own. I guess you should be proud of that. But that wouldn't be very British, would it? Sorry.
Right.
Left.
Peace.
Whoa!
Tested.
Not tested.
Comedy.
Tragedy.
Body.
Mind. Questions.
Answers.
Left, please.
Right.
Great minds don't think alike. Get the independent perspective. Tomorrow for just 30p.
Cheap.
Ooh, outrageous!
Ready? Smile.
Getting together is always rewarding. Even more so if you join New BT together. You get up to 3 hours of inclusive call time every month. Simpler, lower prices. And half-price additional line connection. All of this all in one for just $11.99 a month, including your line rental.
And give my regard to your alien friend. Such a vivid imagination.
Get BT together. Call 0800 05 5555 and stay in touch.
Vaarwel my eie soete lief, moet ver, ver hier vandaan, betreur my nie.
While their families bore the brunt of the war, the Boers took the fight across the Orange River into the British Cape Colony.
Ek sal jou nooit nie, nooit vergeet.
The aim was to stir up their fellow Afrikaners in the Cape into rebellion. Britain's High Commissioner, Lord Milner, was terrified of an uprising, so troops patrolled the colony, hunting down the invading Boers and rebel Afrikaners. The war in the Cape was fragmented, isolated skirmishes punctuating the constant hunt for supplies. The Boers lived off the land, appearing to some as heroic freedom fighters, to others as murderous thugs. In August 1901, Boer rebels arrived at a loyal British farmhouse in the Eastern Cape. Nora Featherstone was 11. In old age, she recorded her memories of that day.
They rushed into the house. They said, we want breakfast for 15, please. We didn't have one thing left in that house. They'd eaten up everything. And they said to Mother, we're very sorry. But you had orders to burn your house and your furniture.
They then said, if you can produce your husband, we will not burn the furniture or the house. So my grandmother said it's quite impossible. She didn't tell them, but my grandfather was with Gorringer's flying column, hunting those very Boers. They then said, well, we will not burn the furniture.
They carried out every single thing, and all the glass doors were smashed. They had the most glorious time. They romping and jumping about.
They had ransacked every room, and they had stolen my grandmother's diamond ring, and one of them went into Aunt Violet's room and put on her evening frock.
The one had an evening dress on. And I am Miss Violet Featherstone. He was dancing on the floor. He was dancing on the floor.
And the family were very upset. They then set fire to the house.
We all stood there and watched the poor roof falling in. Made us feel very, very sad. It was no good being cross. What is the good of being cross? You see, it only makes matters worse.
The Boer officer in charge had long been hunted by the British.
Gideon Skippers was apprehended by the Coldstream Guards for shooting some local coloured people in the area who he reckoned had been spying for the British, which may be quite true or not, I don't know. Amongst these coloured people were a young girl who was pregnant, and she was tied to the wheel of a wagon and thrashed until she gave birth under the lash. He was court-martialed in the courthouse here, and then he was subsequently taken up to Croft Net, where he was executed by a firing squad. My father was actually present when he was executed.
Marjorie Stuckey's grandmother had testified against Gideon Skippers at his trial. A century on, local loyalties are still divided.
Well, I prefer not to say anything about him because I have to live in this town, and the leader of this lot who burnt the house is a hero in this town.
Part of the Boers' heroic image comes from their tenacity in the face of great hardship. Hungry and with clothes in tatters, they were chased into the mountains of the Cape. Survival depended on hit-and-run attacks on isolated British units. General Smuts' commando was on its last legs when it stumbled on 200 men of the 17th Lancers, a crack British regiment nicknamed the Death or Glory Boys. Hugely outnumbered, a small group of exhausted Boers saw their chance.
They came after the Lancers mainly because they needed provisions and horses. And Denace and the guys, they haven't got too much ammunition either. Yeah. So they've got to be pretty careful at who they're shooting at.
Guide Steve Lunderstead shows Michael Rates around the battlefield. Michael's grandfather, Denace Rates, was in the thick of the Boer attack on the Lancers.
They've been here 3 or 4 days, I think, the 17th Lancers, brought in as one of the stop groups to try and catch Smuts' commando. And it certainly looks to me like a bit of a holiday camp. No pickets, no sentries out, in a valley, lovely house where the officers could sleep, relax, nice river nearby, reading the daily newspaper perhaps. But certainly caught totally unawares. The first the camp would have known of it is when this little bit of shooting started, just here.
The Boers had approached the camp down this road. They stormed the startled Lancers on rough ground just above the farm. The action only lasted minutes. Michael has brought with him his grandfather's diary of the war. He and Steve tie in the account of the attack on the Lancers a century ago to the actual location today.
We shot the one Englishman after the other through the head as they peered over the rocks to fire.
They're now peering over the rocks to fire?
Yeah. He goes on to say a certain Lieutenant Sheridan stuck his head out, right in front of Jan Boreas, who instantly put a bullet through it. His hat jumped as much as a couple of feet into the air, and we all shouted out with great jubilation, in English, funnily enough. "Good shot, Uncle Jack."
This is a nightmare come true, you know that?
Yeah.
For the British. They won't at this stage believe this is happening to them. It's total turmoil.
Yeah.
Right? And you've got this little group of Boers, because they were a little group of Boers, that have captured this entire rocky outcrop, which is the key to the battle. Mm. Anyone who controls this is controlling everything.
Yeah. They all put up their hands and called, "We surrender, for God's sake, stop it, we surrender." We took their rifles and hurled these aside. Then, without attending to the prisoners, we burst into the camp.
And this is your main memorial for the Death or Glory boys. You got your gunners who were killed on the ridge just behind us, where that gun, yes. In fact, an ace killed all 4 of them, I think, if you remember correctly. Yeah. But this is mostly your men who died in the action. The officers all have their own separate memorials. We've got old Lieutenant Russell, all Lancers, Lieutenant Robert Morritt, and old Lieutenant Richard Sheridan, Winston Churchill's cousin.
Yeah.
Lieutenant 17th Lancers, Death or Glory boys, one of 38 Brits to die, and only one Boer. Absolute disaster for the British Army.
And completely the opposite for the Boers. It was salvation for them. They arrived here on their last legs, and the death of these people meant that they could re-equip themselves and fight on. And in fact, my grandfather rode away from here on Sheridan's horse.
The English were nearer to the colored people. They will come into your home and they will talk to you. They will eat from your plate. And whereas the Boer will never, ever have done that. And also the English people, they will let you come in by their front door. And at the Boer, you have to go and knock at the kitchen door. You may not come in at the front door.
Rachel Smith's great-uncle, Abraham Esau, led coloured resistance against the Boers, living on in folk memory as a hero. He spied on the Boers. He petitioned Lord Milner, unsuccessfully, for guns. He organised the women and children to defend the town. In January 1901, Boers captured Calvinia and declared martial law.
The Boers saw Abraham Esau as a traitor, a rebel. They looked at him, he's making trouble. And he's trying to encourage the rest of the colored community to rise against the Boer.
Abraham Esau, a martyr remembered. During the Anglo Boer War, tens of thousands of African and colored people aligned themselves with the British cause. Prominent amongst them was the village blacksmith Abram Esau. Esau and his compatriots had joined the fight to protect what few rights they had under imperial rule. In January of 1901, Calvinia was captured by Free State commandos. Esau was amongst those who were arrested.
The Boer caught up with Abram Esau, and they brought him to the town where he was killed. He was dragged between two horses, that my mother told me. And then he was shot. They told us, the children sometimes when we went there, that they cut out his tongue and they cut out Abram Esau's eyes. They took the eyes out. The next day, some of the people went to put flowers. Where his blood was spilled, they put some flowers there.
Next week in the Boer War, the British concentration camps for blacks, a tragedy long covered up. The atrocities spiral in the final months. The Boers take the war to the bitter end, and the settlement paves the way for nearly a century of rancour and oppression.
A Channel 4 book